Everyone okay down there? Ready to go? Are you laughing at me? Are you ready? Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Westerville City Schools Board of Education. We're delighted to have all of you this evening. The agenda will be displayed on the screens in the front of the room. There will be two opportunities this evening to address the board, the first being Agenda Item 7.1. The first set of public comments is relative to Agenda Items 8.1 through 12.5. Please state the agenda items you are referencing at the beginning of your comments. The second opportunity is Agenda 13.1. There's a sign-up sheet located on the table in the back of the room, and each speaker will have 5 minutes to address the board, and a timer will be shown on the screen. And with that, Ms. Marshall, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Bell?
Here.
Mrs. Meyer?
Here.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Here.
Mrs. Altman?
Here.
Mrs. Davidson?
Here. Will you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, in liberty and justice for all.
Okay, up first on our agenda, we're going to head into executive session. May I have a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of preparing, conducting, or reviewing negotiations with employees regarding their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment?
So moved.
Second.
There we go.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. Okay, we are back from executive session, and we're moving along to district highlights and recognitions. We do not have any this evening, which takes us to reports, the superintendent's report. We have 5.1, food service update, and 5.2, transportation update, and Dr. Kellogg's going to talk to us.
Thank you, President Davidson, members of the board. Quickest superintendent's update you're ever going to get, right? So annually, we're required to inform the board that we're in compliance with nutritional standards that are outlined for us. We typically do that at the start of the year. We missed it this year, so there you go. We are doing that still. So that's the report. The second half of it, just a piece that I think the board would be interested in. The satellite bistros at Central and North are up and running. They're staffed, and it's going well. And the one at South, that's part of the renovation of the media center, was just waiting on inspection, and that one will be going as well, too. So that's been a several years pre-COVID project getting up and running, and the students at Superintendent's Advisory will stop asking me when that's going to happen now because it's up and running. So that's all I have for you this evening. If there was any questions, I'm happy to take them or refer them to Carrie Dennis, who knows more about food service than I do.
Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. 6.1, approve the minutes of the Board of Education. I'm sorry. Oh. Sorry, Dorn.
Thank you, President Davidson, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, and Ms. Marshall. I am just going to report out quickly this evening about our transportation model for next year. And so I've got a couple of slides to show you, but if you recall last year during the school year, we made a modification to our model to try and become a little bit more efficient in our being able to bring kids to and from school without impacting our teaching and learning as much as we had been based on a driver shortage. And so as an example of today, we had Heritage Middle School on a 2-hour early release. If this had been last year's model, we would have put a secondary building in remote today, in remote learning, and also delayed in elementary. So we did find some efficiencies, but we've had a chance to come back and look and see if we could make any more changes. But one of the things that we said that we would do last year when we made this announcement was that we would re-engage the community because there was still conversation about changing the high school start time, maybe pushing it back further. And I think also since we moved to this model this year, we've gotten a lot of feedback about the 4 p.m. end time for the elementary tier 2. So a couple of things for us to talk about there. Just so that we're all on the same page about the national driver shortage and how that affects Westerville City Schools, just know that our team works tirelessly to try and recruit new drivers. We've hired 14 drivers this year. And so when you take a look at that and combine that with 35 drivers that are in their first 5 years of experience, you start to see that we are constantly hiring new people. So we've been able to maintain that. If we hadn't been able to maintain that hiring average, we would really be struggling right now. But please note that we have 80 drivers, more than 80 drivers, with 10 or less years of experience. So hopefully we'll be able to retain these folks for their entire career and make us really happy. We did put a committee together. That committee had parents, teachers, building administrators, district administrators, transportation department, executive leadership, and board members serving as observers to the committees, not participants. The committee's charges were to take a look at the community's preference of the tiers, high school, middle school, and elementary school tiering, and the tolerance for times of those tiers based on the order. We had 3 meetings, and we surveyed our stakeholders. We surveyed high school parents, middle school parents, elementary school parents, and all of our staff. So I know this is very hard to read, so hopefully it's easier to see on your screen. But what you'll notice in that top graphic, this are our elementary school parents' responses. The top 2 sectors are highlighted. Those are the high school as the preferred first tier preference by our elementary school parents. It's interesting to note, though, that the second largest sector in that graph, that blue sector, actually is an elementary as a first tier. So there are some folks out there who would like to see us have elementary school as our first tier. but the majority of the elementary school parents preferred to leave it as high school is first. For our middle school parent respondents, just over half of the middle school parents indicated that high school should remain as the first tier. But one thing I'm trying to highlight up there with those sectors being highlighted, that those two largest sectors identify that middle school remain in the middle of the three tiers. So both that first graphic and then the lower graphic where we highlighted all three of those time frames are related to middle school falling in the middle of the two tiers or three tiers. The majority of high school respondents also thought that high school should remain the first tier as shown in the top graphic. The second graphic, though, also supports that, with the vast majority of high school parents thinking that high school should start before 8 a.m. of the respondents. When you take a look at our staff survey responses, the staff was actually split pretty closely between high school first and elementary school first. I find that very interesting. But what they had in common is that middle school will be in the middle. So we took those responses. We've had some really good discussion. We, after the second meeting, thought that maybe we were not going to make any changes at all. And then some committee members spoke up and asked us to review it one more time and take a look at elementary school as what that might look like as the first tier. And so we went back for a third meeting, and we actually discussed these three concepts. So the first concept on the top of the screen is just what our current model is. The concept in the middle of the screen, in the middle of that table, is what it would look like if elementary school were the first tier. So when you take into account all of the factors in the comments, elementary as a first tier sounds pretty good to a lot of people, but with 8 a.m. as the start time. Our high school current start time, 7:25. Wasn't really a lot of tolerance to move elementary school up earlier than 8 a.m., as you can see back on the elementary school slide. But with elementary starting at 8 a.m., that put our middle school tier in this particular model, whether it's middle or high school, ending after 4. That did not appear to be desirable. And so where we settled in this is that the high school tier remaining the same, the middle school tier being the next level tier, and the elementary school tier still being the third tier, but a couple of different things that we've pulled out of here. One thing to note is that we plan to pull the magnet students, the Hamby and Emerson students, not just magnet, but the gifted program as well, and move them up to an 8 a.m. start time. So we are effectively still going to have 4 tiers, but instead of the fourth tier ending at 4, this tier is going to start at 8 and end at 2:30. By doing that, we are able to dedicate geographical resources so our magnet programs do not have attendance boundaries. So when we plan for transportation, we plan them by geographical boundaries. What makes sense, which students are in the programs this year, and how will we route to those. We do the same thing with our St. Paul students, and so we are able to dedicate more resources to those two groups if we take them at the same time and they ride buses together. So some of you may remember, I did not actually remember, Mr. Snyder reminded me earlier today that we did do this with our Central College Christian Academy students a while back. So this is not the first time that we've done this, but we are going to, and I'm going to summarize here. So our high school tier, no changes, 725 to 205. Our magnet tier then would be moving them up to an 8 a.m. start time with a 225 finish time. Our middle school tier still stays in the middle, but we've adjusted the middle school time just a little bit, so it's 8:15 to 2:50. And then our elementary school, that large group of elementary schools, excluding Emerson and Hamby, We move them back into a single grouping, and with an end time, I think the end time's the important piece here, of 3:40 rather than 4 p.m. So we feel like this is going to be, it's a more efficient model in terms of the number of resources we have on the road at any given time right now, which is just over 90 for this year. This will take us down to 88. So we should find more efficiencies that way. But I think that this is the best model that represents the data and the comments that we received. One other thing to highlight, the preschool. We are able to also end our preschool day a little bit earlier. I'm going to say that these are tentative dates, because one of the things that we have to work out right now are that with the expansion of our preschool program, tentative times, I think, is that what's the order of this delivering students to either the early learning center or to Point View, where we just have to work through that a little bit. So very minor adjustments there, but this is effectively what the preschool schedule will look like. Okay, questions?
Yes, I do. And I've shared some of my thoughts with you previously, and I'm going to share them again. First off, I do want to couch this, and I understand this is an administrative decision, and I'm just sharing my thoughts with you from where I sit. I am concerned about separating the magnet schools so extensively from the other elementary schools. My concerns, and I don't have a solution, but my concerns are around several arenas. One is, with an 8 a.m. start time, as we look at our youngest children and the relatively small number of those students when you spread them across the district, we are talking about our youngest children being out waiting for the bus before dawn fully arises. When we think about transportation times and so forth, in the winter, it's still dark when a lot of them will be getting on the bus. That's one that worries me quite a bit. Another one kind of relates to that, in that whole idea of separating our magnet kids more extensively from the other elementary kids. With an 8 a.m. start time and a 2:30 dismissal time, it removes the kids more from the structures of childcare that exist within a number of neighborhoods. So, over the years, I've known a lot of magnet parents who partner with other elementary parents within their neighborhoods. So the kids will, stay with friends in the neighborhood in the morning or after school or whatever. This time frame makes that much less likely to occur, which to me is a problem in that informal childcare structure. In that same regard, as regards childcare, I realize that starting, 9:30 in the morning isn't optimal for people as they head for work in the morning. But as I weigh that against the middle of the afternoon dismissal at 2:30, I worry about that childcare approach as well, particularly if we have effectively obviated the informal childcare within the neighborhoods. It's not as likely that people coming in from the magnet program an hour before their age peers will find those places to stay in the neighborhood with the other families. So that concerns me as well. I'm also concerned about, and this may be a very small concern in the greater picture, the idea of some of our youngest students sharing bus with middle schoolers on a regular basis. I'm not saying that St. Paul kids have behavior problems. I'm not saying that at all. But they're adolescents, and there's a difference there. When we talk about Central College Christian Academy, that is a K-5 entity, not an up to 8th grade entity. So there's a difference in maturation there. So I have some concerns about that. And then a specific question, other than just telling you what I don't like. Are we going to be doing transfers? You talk about the geographic boundaries within this.
Yes.
So how are those transfers going to work? So in other words, are we going to be taking kids to middle schools for transfers to other buses? So our little ones, first, second, third grade, the younger ones will be making those transfers at the middle schools at the same time all of our middle schoolers are rolling in.
So, yes, there will be transfers with this program, or this model, I should say. I would say from our transportation department folks, that's the one thing that they would prefer not to have, right? So they, in fact, were so excited 2 years ago when we were able to eliminate the transfers, and then now we see ourselves, and it has nothing to do with transfers, but in this issue with our model and being able to try and reduce our effects on the school day schedule changes. So it will work with the meeting at a middle school. The transfer time will take place probably more than 30 minutes, though, before middle school starts. We don't anticipate that traffic being a crossover traffic. So the middle school is going to start at 8:15. The transfer is probably going to be taking place in the 7:30 to 7:35 range. So I don't see that being, in other words, I'm a little more optimistic about that maybe than. The other component to this is transfers. You get really concerned with small children. Our concerns were alleviated a little bit knowing that we won't have kindergartners in our transfers anymore. But we did do transfers for several years, and kindergarten students were our main concern. So if kindergartners aren't part of it, then you're talking about first graders, right? Because it's not like the concern's going to go away. It's just going to, but we do feel more comfortable with it. But yeah, in the end, we would love to have sufficient number of drivers not to be able to do any of this and just take kids from home to school.
Yeah, and I understand that we are between that proverbial rock and a hard place. But I do have a lot of concerns, particularly about our younger students, for the reasons that I iterated. And, you've underscored that when we talk about the transfers taking place between 7:30 and 7:45, that just reaffirms the idea that we're going to have a lot of little ones, not a lot, we're going to have some groups of little ones catching the bus before dawn, and they'll be on their own. So that's, I am very concerned. I think this is a big change for our existing magnet and gifted families. I'm not sure that that they were aware that they were in the spotlight for this. So I'm concerned. I know that changes have to occur. I know you're working really hard for the greater good of the district, but these concerns weigh pretty heavily on me when I'm thinking of 6, 7, and 8-year-old children. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, and thank you for the presentation. And I'm curious, when will the parents be notified about this change so that they can, line up childcare and get their days all in order?
Our communication would start relatively soon. I think we've got a couple of different things that we've got going on out here, right? We've got magnet lottery coming up. I mean, all of these things need to be part of a parent's decision.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be relatively soon. Our first step, though, was notifying you. And so I would assume that our goal would be to have all of this information out mid-January.
Okay.
I mean, and then with follow-up,
Mhm.
Because mid-January is an awful early time when next August is when the effect is going to roll in too. So we've got both of those time constraints. We want to have people with the best information possible to make decisions, and we also want to make sure that they're paying closer attention to this because the impact is so far away right now. I mean, the impact is 8 months from now.
Sure. Well, it definitely gives them more time to line up childcare and to make those arrangements. So if I had a young child, I would appreciate that sooner rather than later. I know you said preschool is tentative. I'm wondering, when do you think, and that is pretty close, when do you think parents will know for sure what those times are?
Well, right now, as we're making the switch over winter break, we're looking at a model where we are We've identified the students that are moving. The way that we identify the students that will attend to two different buildings next year is going to be different because we're going to have time to establish that. So if we are able to establish it in such a way where they're separate resources from each other, then you've seen the times. But if we have to have a drop-off in building A and then drop off at building B, then one of them is going to be 5 to 7 minutes
Okay.
later. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for this. I understand there are no easy answers to this situation. With the increased efficiencies with this model, a couple of things. How tight are we with the elementary, with all of the elementary buildings going back on the same schedule? In other words, what I'm thinking in my head is, are we so tight on drivers and personnel that if we're missing one driver, it's going to have the kind of a ripple effect where now several buildings will wind up essentially with a later delivery time for students?
It's
I
a
don't know how articulate I'm asking the
hard
question.
scenario to respond to specifically because we have 100 routes, right? And if, depending upon which, let's just say 5 drivers are out, that changes our need and our reaction, right? How do we respond to those specific needs? What I can tell you is this. Right now, at our highest impact of resources on the road at one time, there's 93 buses on the road at one time. With the magnet students moving to a different time frame, that changes to 88. It changes when we have that maximum capacity on the road. It changes who we have it with, but it reduces the maximum capacity.
Okay. Another way of asking this, let me try it again. What I'm trying to make sure we don't do is change the times. So now we got everybody back on the same time, but what winds up happening in reality is due to staffing shortages, we essentially wind up still with a 2-tier system where half of them are going to wind up getting home as if they were getting out at 4 anyway.
So in general, this is an in general response again because it depends on who's out. By not changing the order of the tiers, high school, middle school, elementary school, when we do have issues, I think we'll see still the effect more on the secondary. But yes, we will have more vehicles on the road during our elementary school tier, which does create some challenges, but it's the same challenges that we've always faced with doublebacks.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm probably going to ask the same question as Jen. So have we looked into Y programs being hosted at one of our magnet schools?
That's a Y program decision, and I think they base those decisions on number of participants.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would love to have them. I think that would have to do with whether or not parents wanted to participate. So right now, they are participating at, essentially, I think they're homeschool. We do some shuttling, but it's certainly doable from our perspective. From the Y program, I can reach out to Laura Miller and ask her about it.
Yeah.
But I think, if they thought that was a viable avenue, I don't want to speak for them, but I think if they thought it was a viable avenue, I don't know why we wouldn't consider it.
Mm-hmm. Could you do that for us? That would.
Absolutely.
Okay. Second thing, were there magnet or gifted parents on the committees? Do you know?
Magnet principals, magnet teachers. I actually cannot recall if there was a magnet parent or not.
Did they
Dr.
share the
Baker's saying
same
no.
concerns as Nancy's?
What's that?
Did they share the same concerns that Nancy had?
I think that the concern about children being picked up, what time their bus
Yeah.
would arrive in the morning from when they talked about elementary, that was one of the things that they did talk about. And that's why I think there was kind of that, walking around the room, not taking part of any individual conversation, but sort of listening to them. Why, because we could have ended the end of the day earlier if we would have pushed that start time up earlier than 8 for elementary school, which I don't think anybody, and I think that was probably one of the factors for that.
So currently, how many St. Paul routes do we have?
12? 12
So would
and
12?
14 magnet.
14, okay, so would 12 buses then be doing transfers? I mean, I know I'm
We
getting
would
into
actually
the weeds.
increase
I'm
our
trying
number
to
of
figure out how this
resources to
works.
probably 20 because they're available at that time. And what would also help us do is maybe shorten, in some cases, the actual ride time. Because we're not going so far to pick up so many kids when we can put more kids and less kids and more resources, right, to shorten the time period. But yes, the transfer would still be a component to that.
Okay. I think that's it for now for me.
Thank you. I was one of the observers at the high school table for this, so thank you for letting me be part of that, at least to listen to the conversation. And just a couple things, because my colleagues have hit on lots of pieces. It was a ton of work, and I would say, if I had to summarize, the feeling in the room, it was like, this is really hard. This is really hard. And you end up feeling backed into, making a recommendation that I think a lot of people were like, well, it's not my ideal, but this is really hard. It's a push and pull between all these different factors. So I appreciate everybody who served on those because they really dug in and weighed all the many factors and tried to think about, their position for their level that they were representing, but also listening to others too. So just really appreciate everybody who served on that because it's not easy to come to a recommendation. So, I think I heard a lot of the same concerns, that board members have expressed here. I do want to just reiterate reaching out to the why because the situation now will be that Hamby and Emerson families won't have YWCA aftercare as an option. It literally won't be an option. So that is, something that we need to help try to generate, I think, for them. And I think for now, the other thing I'll just say is I would love it if we could use a different phrase. I heard you sort of say it yourself. Magnet tier might imply to some people that somehow the gifted self-contained programs
Right.
that Hamby is not included in this, but they are.
Mhm.
So if we can just talk about the building names, maybe that might be clearer to folks.
Absolutely. It is challenging.
Yeah, it is. So, and I just want to thank our transportation folks. I know that during this too, sort of thinking through what would this mean and developing different scenarios, there was a lot of work. So I see Randy in the back. Thank you for all the work that you and your team put into just generating options and helping people understand what that might mean. So again, there's no perfect solution, but I think those are my main questions and stuff for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to really move on this time. So 6.1, approve the minutes of the Board of Education meeting held on Monday, November 21st, 2022, as presented. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments here? Hearing none?
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. We do not have any public comments so far this evening. 8.1, a resolution to approve the purchases in accordance with ORC 5705.41 and Board Policy 6320. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And whenever you're ready, Ms. Marshall.
Thank you, President Davidson, members of the board. So this is what we call then and now purchase orders, where we have a purchase order that was opened after an invoice date. In this case, this is for a project for South Phase 6, and it was just a matter of a timing issue. Budget was available for this purchase, so I recommend that you approve it so that we can pay it.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none?
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Nesterbaker?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. 8.2, resolution to reinstate OASBO 457 deferred compensation plan. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you again. So this is an update actually from the CARES Act. We're a little bit behind with that, so we are cleaning up some language in the plan. We are also adding some definitions for the CARES Act and for the eligible designated beneficiary. And we are increasing or decreasing the age for the minimum distribution from 72 to 70 and a half, which is under the Secures Act change. Those are all of the changes for the plan that you have in front of you.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none?
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Nesterbaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. Moving on to the personnel consent agenda, I'm going to pull two items. 9.8, which is one-time pays. My daughter is on here for hosting a volleyball camp this summer. And then 9.16, same daughter is back on here. She is a tournament worker at South. So I will not be voting on those, but may I have a motion for 9.1 through 9.15, excluding 9.16 and 9.8?
So moved.
Second.
Good evening, President Davidson, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, and Ms. Marshall. The items in tonight's personnel consent agenda represent regular action items in regards to resignations, employment, and contract status changes. However, there are several items to be noted on tonight's agenda. We have two MOAs with WESA, both for language that was previously agreed upon and inadvertently admitted from the collective bargaining agreement. An MOU with WEA to raise the athletic event assistant rate to meet the state's increase to the minimum wage rate that will be effective in January. And then the July resignation of Mr. Jeff LaRose, who currently serves as the Director of Facilities. Mr. LaRose has been instrumental in so many inspired and innovative instructional spaces throughout our district, but most recently, Point View and Amherst renovations, along with the ongoing renovation of Westerville South High School, the opening of the new beautiful Minerva France Elementary School, and in the fall, the planned opening of Minerva Park Middle School. Just to point out a few, we'd like to thank Mr. LaRose for his creativity and wish him well. We have two retirements this evening, so please join me in congratulating Miss Christina Raslovic, retiring from Westerville South with 20 years of service, and Carrie Tucker retiring from Robert Frost with 27 years of service. We want to wish them well also for a very long, enjoyable retirement after so many years of dedicated service to our students and community. Of special interest, the board has for its consideration the collective bargaining agreement with local OPC 719, that was ratified by their members on November 30th. I would be happy to answer any questions that you have. None?
Hearing none?
Dr. Nesterbaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. Now may I have a motion for the personnel consent agenda 9.8 and 9.16?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments here? Hearing none?
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Dr. Nesterbaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
And Mrs. Davidson?
I'll abstain. Thank you. Moving on to old business. Would it be okay if I did all these as one? So 10.1 through 10.3. May I have a motion for policy 5111, policy 6700, and policy 8320?
So moved.
Second?
Any questions or concerns here? Hearing none?
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Nesterbaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. New business, 11.1, first reading policy 8600, and Mr. Randy Snyder is with us tonight. Welcome, Randy.
Good evening, everyone. President Davidson, Vice President Altman, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, and Ms. Marshall. Before you this evening is Policy 8600, Transportation, which is recommended for review and/or updates according to current board policy, as well as the Neola recommendations and needed language housekeeping to align this policy with updates to the Ohio Administrative Codes and Ohio Revised Codes. Interesting point, in a little bit of the spirit of Mr. Reeves, this policy was originally adopted in December of 2009, and a number of our buses this year are actually scheduled for retirement that have been in service since this policy first, okay, maybe not. So it was originally adopted in December of 2009. Most recently was revised and adopted in November of 2021. And it's something to call out that Westerville's transportation policies and our administrative guidelines continue to exceed the state minimum requirements that are set before us by the state of Ohio. Therefore, we recommend that the Board of Education approve Policy 8600 as revised and presented.
Two short questions.
Okay.
I'm not going to reiterate magnet school concerns. As you look at this policy, and actually this is not a question, it's a going forward piece. Please, going forward, let's do what we can to put a number of the guideline pieces that exist within this policy into administrative guidelines rather than policy language. It's kind of a function of Neola. They like to load up the policy with what are really administrative guidelines. So as we go forward, hopefully not quite as long until we revise this policy, let's keep in mind that administrative guidelines are just that, and that we should try and put pieces in there where we can. Second thing is a question. In the policy, we talk about not making any transportation changes for private school and charter schools mid-year. But as I was thinking about history, and I actually was talking to Ron about this before the meeting, there have been times when we have made changes mid-year with our public school population here in Westerville City Schools. So why is it that we now will be holding a different approach? And actually, are we still is it still permissible within the state to make changes mid-year for public schools? And if so, are we holding public schools and private charter schools to a different standard?
Changes to the parameters in which transportation are set up once the school year begins. And I'll use high school transportation as an example. If a school district begins a school year with high school transportation being provided, the district legally is not allowed to make any changes to that service parameter across the entire operation for both public and non-public school students. Going one step further into that, if we were to start the school year with quarter-mile bus stops according to a district's policy, we would not be able to adjust that to a half-a-mile bus stop parameter. And again, it's about the service parameters that we start the school year with across all the operation across the district, whether public for Westerville or non-public schools, privates, etc. We are not allowed to change the parameter of those service levels once the school year begins, specifically reduction of service levels.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Hearing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next, 11.2, first reading, policy 5335, care of students with chronic health conditions. And Tammy and Rachel join us. Welcome, ladies.
Hi, good evening. President Davidson, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, Mrs. Marshall. We are presenting two policies. These are back-to-back, so we'll cover both of them while we're here. Yes, Rachel Pinto, district nurse, is here. She is going to better answer all of your questions on these. I can give it a shot, but this is going to be your person. So let's start with policy 5335, the care of students with chronic health conditions. The updates here are going to be related to the care and management of the conditions, as well as the training component. You'll see some adjustments there. So we would, recommend approving these updates to just overall increase the care and the training component, and happy to have myself or Rachel answer any questions.
Thank you. I was just curious as to what do we do now in terms of how we care for students with diabetes?
Do you want me to answer that now, or that is the next one?
Oh,
that
my
will-
apologies.
It's okay. I mean, it does fall under this one a little bit, but.
I can wait.
I actually had the same question about allergies now. What are we doing now to train staff, and will that look different regarding food allergies and so on?
Yeah, we have, we ran a few numbers before this. We have just over 2,000 allergies at our attention, trending forward on that. So food is a large majority of that, but I'll let Rachel talk a little bit about what those action plans look like, and I can talk more about the plan.
Great, thanks.
What's your question about current training?
Yeah, so just about what are we doing now, and then will that look different, or how will that look different moving forward?
So our it really doesn't look a lot different.
Okay.
It's just spelled out more clearly. But currently, all staff will do the public works training to some extent that includes some of those medical pieces. And then the staff members that volunteer to be trained receive more extensive training. So for field trips, when they're accompanied by just teachers or other staff members, then they receive training with the nurses to cover those medical diagnoses. If they have something special in their classroom that they need to just know what to do with, they do that. But all the training pieces are the same. The nurses do the training. They're the only ones that can teach medical pieces. We train our health aides that are in the clinics, specific to those clinics. And then for allergies, it's for each child that has a diagnosis that we're aware of. They get special training on their healthcare plans that are created, and they also receive generalized training for children that don't have medication, for our stock epinephrine pens, and they already receive everything that's already in that policy update. It's just more spelled out clearly.
Thank you.
So I'm going to back up here a second. Did I hear you say they have to volunteer to be trained?
Go ahead. So a couple ways. We have obviously our nurses and health aides, clinic staff, well-trained. Okay, there's the good news. From there, what we have improved this year is every building principal and assistant principal are fully trained to back up their clinic. That hasn't always been standard practice for lots and lots of reasons. So it would fall to other staff members who would, yes, volunteer to be trained, meaning your front office support staff. That is something that they have to volunteer to do. Same with teachers and other staff who would go on field trips, lots of places that we go. Otherwise, it would fall to clinic staff, administration to accompany those pieces. So we have clinic backup plans for every building. Some have 2 or 3 people backed up. Other people have a lot more, a lot less, but it is something that you can only require administration to complete.
So if you're going on a field trip and a child has allergy to bee stings and needs EpiPen, would that teacher be trained?
So field trips, we ask for a 1 to 2 week window at least, if not more. That way the clinic can run the allergies, run all the medical pieces. Then we would look at who's going on the field trip, if it's teachers, aides, et cetera, and offer them to be trained on the medical conditions going on that field trip. They do have the right to say no thank you.
I don't like that. I really, this burns me up a little bit.
So in certain cases when a lot of people do volunteer, but that isn't always the case. So there are times if we know enough in advance, or if it's a different medical condition that requires a lot more care, then we do our best to sub that out and send the health aide or the nurse on those trips. Again, we know where we are with subs, so it's not always easy to do.
So I know I've gone on the record saying before, I hate that EpiPens are kept in the nurses' area when they really can't get to a kid in time. Just kind of want to say that one more time. And I would ask and hope that all of our staff get trained if there is a child in need. I would just hope they would do that. So just want to put my feelings out there.
I do have one follow-up then after that, which is that also, that training available to cafeteria recess aides? It's the same situation for them.
And there is a minimum training, there's kind of different layers. So every staff member would go through the public school works of the basics behind allergies. So they would get that level of training, and then again, the school nurse usually takes it to another layer of different pieces, and then from there, volunteers can go through more hands-on training, specifically, which is going to be the best you can do in whatever situation you're in, to have that hands-on training with your school nurse.
I'm assuming then that if the school nurse or the health aide isn't available, that at least somebody else in the building is able to get there quickly, because it is just seconds to be able to react to something like that.
Sure.
It's very concerning.
Yeah, so we've really put a lot of time into the backup clinic plans. So you would have an administrator in the building that would have that next backup tier if there's nobody else that is trained. That varies, but each building knows their plan, and like the school nurse and the principal know, hey, here are people in our building. If the nurse isn't there, if the health aide's not there, if the principal's not, there would be kind of this ranking, very clear plan of who, where, when would be ready for those situations.
I have one more question.
Mhm.
So what happens if there's a substitute?
In what
Are they
regard?
notified if a child has some sort of medical condition?
Of a,
Just to be aware of signs or...
of a teacher? Like a substitute teacher?
Correct.
Yes, they would have, just like any other roster, I would sure hope those sub-plans have everything that you need to know about a kid.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, so it's in writing.
Mhm.
Okay.
Is there a reason why we don't require everyone to kind of go through that training?
I am unsure if Dr. Kellogg wants to answer this question.
Probably a conversation with our association members and their leadership. It is outside the scope of a normal teacher's responsibility to take on nursing responsibilities. I hear where you're coming from and understand that, but there are limitations to what we can require certain employee groups to do. I think, and Tammy alluded to it, I think the offer is always made available, and I know our staff are just as concerned as the board is in terms of student safety. So I would generally believe that if you have a child in your classroom with an allergy that's going to need a response, depending on what intervention is needed, because there's different intervention needs for different allergies, right? So the comfort level that person has in terms of being trained to deliver medical support for that student may be dependent upon that. And then having the backup pieces, and I think this is where Tammy's call to bring people forward like Rachel at her side this year, this is new, post-COVID, as we explore more and more about student health and wellness and how we can respond to that better and have more stronger plans in place to protect our children. That's what you're starting to see evolve as they talk about the training, the plans, those things that happen. So I know our staff, they are generally want to support our kids. I think the limitation is going to be in terms of what medical intervention a particular child will need. And then keep in mind that some of our more medically fragile children who need a higher degree of medical intervention are going to be protected under IDEA and 504 plans, and so support around that is going to be elevated around those specific plans as well. So we continue to want to be better in this space. Like I said, I know a lot of our staff participate in the training. There's basic training at fall that they're all required to do. It's the medical intervention piece and how far can we push them and ask them or require them to do training that is outside the scope of their normal responsibilities. I think we are fortunate that we have good people who want to do the right things and protect our kids. It will never be perfect. You cited it. We can train the teacher. This is substitute in the classroom on that given day, and their response may be different. So it will never be perfect given the resources we have, but it can always be better, and we'll continue that effort. So, I appreciate, I know Rachel's brought a lot of that thinking to the table and educating Tammy, as Tammy will tell you, and we're learning a lot, and I think improving our health services to our clinics and our staff. As they pointed out, all administrators now are required to have the training. And so we continue to put that piece forward.
Yeah, and I think that is a big growth area for us. And we have a lot of administrators who have never been med trained, right? But even today, we're talking a principal through, a diabetic situation and insulin and dosing, and I mean it is a lot, but and there is some level of discomfort there. But to be able to go through it and rep through it, because you just never know what you're going to be up against, and we have a lot of needs that are growing. So just trying to think through the thoughtful pieces and start with our administration and continue to work and build from there.
Thank you very much. I know you have one more, but I
one more?
appreciate that.
Want me to move on?
Yes.
Next one. So the next one, very similar, just very specific. It's policy 5336, care of students with diabetes. So you're going to see updates in this one with heavy additions and adjustments in the training requirement for staff area. So similar to the last one, but a lot more dense in that area. Again, we're going to require or recommend approving these updates and can take specific questions on the diabetic care.
Yeah, thank you. I am curious as to what do we do now? I mean, there are seconds as somebody that has a diabetic in my family to care.
So currently, when we have our diabetics, whether they're new or previously known, the nurse does all the training again. So once we get doctor's orders, we do specific hands-on training with the health aide that's in the clinic. And everyone is trained to every specific diabetic that's going to be caring for them, because they're all very different. We also meet then with the teacher, so they're comfortable with what information they need to know to keep them safe in their class. And then also with the administrators, like we talked about, and then also any office staff that's willing to back up the clinic. So for our diabetics, we try to make sure that everyone knows what signs and symptoms they're looking for, what to do when some of our kids have pumps beeping, what they're looking for when they're not feeling well, when to call for help, and then particularly with our low blood sugars, what we need to do, because that's a true emergency. And then layers of training, just like before. Then we try to get at least 2 people, 3 people in the building that are trained to help that child with blood sugars, injections, wherever they're at developmentally and what they need. So I think that's pretty much it. And again, in the updates with policy, again, it's a lot of just spelling it out. We have lots of checklists that we go through, and we keep meeting with people until they're comfortable. And even then, we're talking daily with any of our health aides that have diabetics. Nurses are talking with them a lot.
So then is it in similar fashion, like the nurse, the health aide, the administrators, I'm sure the teachers then are told each specific student and what if they're hypo or hyper, and what to look for, and have a plan for that.
And in addition, we would like our diabetics to spend as much time in the classroom. So the teacher receiving that kind of education is helpful as well. One, it can affect their learning just with the variances in their blood sugars. But also if we can if they're comfortable treating in the classroom or right outside the classroom, and we can, as they get older especially, they're more independent and they can do things and they don't miss as much class. So teachers can be a key player in that too.
In the policy, we are using the term treating practitioner. And I'm wondering if there is a definition of treating practitioner, and if that treating practitioner definition should be included.
I believe they changed it from physician to treating practitioner because
Yes.
now we have prescribing nurse practitioners and physician's assistants.
Yeah, I figured that was why.
Yeah.
But my mind went to who else might say they're a treating practitioner. And should we have a requirement that a treating practitioner be a physician, a nurse's assistant, that kind of thing, so that it is spelled out a little more clearly what is acceptable medical help and diagnoses. So that was one thing that jumped out at me. The other was what basically just dovetailing what was talked about in the prior policy. Tammy, you're right. This is a growth area for us as regards training. That's very clear, I think, in the discussion tonight. I fully understand that requiring people to be trained is outside of what we can do for most of our employee groups. But as I'm thinking about our buildings and the potential that we will be in situations where the administrator and the clinic staff are unavailable in the timely enough fashion, I am concerned about how we might go about in the future having more individuals trained, required to be trained. For instance, as we look at those positions in buildings that are beyond classroom positions, so that there is a broader coverage of our buildings and our classrooms. I realize we can't do that today, but I would hope that we can work toward that. That's a significant concern because of the trajectory we're seeing on student numbers who have health issues that require care that even, a decade ago, we weren't seeing in the numbers that we see now. So that's an issue for me as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that you didn't address. I don't think so. I appreciate all this, and I will give my same spiel that I always give. There's a lot in here that seems to me to be administrative guideline, and it seems to me that we ought to be looking at streamlining our policies and placing information in guidelines rather than heavily front-loading it into policy language. So just keeping that in mind going forward too.
So right now, based off of what you know, do you think we have adequate coverage of trained staff and personnel in each of our buildings?
Be honest.
So this is a new area for me, right? So as I'm learning a lot about our clinics, a lot about our acuity, I am blown away at our need. So, to a lot of comments tonight, I don't have a medically fragile child in this district. So I've never had to pay attention to stuff like this, right? We're very upfront with our parents, right? If you've got a new diabetic, to your point of when these people are out, what do I do? We make sure the parent knows, right? Because that's first and foremost. We want to be transparent about the care that we have or don't have. When there's an uncovered clinic, I lose a lot of sleep, right? As does, Rachel and a lot of other people. So I think there are a lot of different approaches that we really need to consider to make our clinics stronger and the care for our kids better. So just like most positions, we are constantly scrambling to make sure our clinics are covered. But even when they're covered, is it adequate? Depends on the building, depends on the need, depends on all those pieces, right? So we just need a better model because it's not like you can just have anybody in the building cover that space, especially depending on the need. So I think our job and our charge is to try and bring forward some better ideas, and we have been looking at those options to present, to say, is this a better way we can look at things in a tenure-focused manner so that it does flow in a more thoughtful manner, the procedures, the protocols, and the safety make a lot more sense as far as what does it look like forward, just not right now. Does that answer your question enough?
It does, because I connected with what you just shared. You don't have a child that has a medical need in the district. Well, I'm the same way. And so hearing, that 2,000 of our students has some kind of a medical need or issue, that, to me, that's a big number. And so I don't have a feel for, how we're doing, how well we're doing, so it's helping me put the pieces to the puzzle together. But I would appreciate if, going forward, if we look at what are some better models of providing care, I think that would help us greatly.
I agree, and just to clear up the numbers, the 2,000 are only our allergies.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So there's, diabetics is a different number, just day-to-day medication management, things we have doctor's orders for, let alone SLCs that have incredible medical needs. That's just a whole nother tier.
And I also think awareness it's the first step in arriving at making the situation better. Because perhaps we have more staff members that would be willing to be trained, but like me, they had no idea how great the need actually is. So having those kinds of conversations at the building level, I think, could help us also.
So I wish I would have said, instead of be honest, trust us and give us the information so we can make better decisions. So I apologize for that comment. But please, there's so much we don't know. I really appreciate all this information, and it really does help as we plan and move forward. Really, so thank you.
I do have just one specific, and I don't follow up, I guess, question, or maybe, I guess, just a thought I'm putting out there. And that's about the folks we talk a lot about because they do such an important job, which is our bus and van drivers, right? Because when they're on a bus or van alone with kids, they're truly alone. They don't have backup with them. So is all of the same training available to them that's available to building staff?
I can have transportation chime in as well. So they go through the same public school work, so the same minimal training is there. We've actually embarked on quite a bit when we talk about, just putting students on buses to go have PE, right? And then we know they have some medical conditions, and can you take it from this clinic to the next clinic? I mean, there's a lot of different things that we're learning, and then asking those questions. Does the bus driver know these medical needs? Obviously, they bring thousands of kids to school every day without, being trained on what those conditions are. But I think it's an area for us to continue to look at, even on some of the emergency medications that could be life-saving in a moment's notice. So yeah, we've had those conversations, have began those, and are excited to try and offer that next layer to our drivers, to any employee that is going to be working with near kids.
Thank you for that, because that's just such a place of vulnerability where kids might be eating something they don't normally eat, where bee stings are more likely to happen, where someone has a diabetic incident. We all can imagine. So thanks especially for looking into that, working with transportation. I would be really interested to hear what we might be able to do in that transportation space. And again, we ask so much of our drivers and appreciate everything they do. It is a moment in a kid's day when they're particularly vulnerable, and there is really one adult there for them. Thanks.
I'm sorry, I have one more question. Thank you. I do really appreciate this. I am wondering when a parent tells the school district that there is a medically, like an allergy, their child has an allergy or they're diabetic, do we ever ask, would it be possible for your child to maybe share what that looks like with the rest of the class? I ask this because when I was in 5th grade, a young boy next to me was diagnosed with diabetes, and he informed the whole class of what we should look for in case something should happen. And it may just save a life someday.
So, and Rachel can chime in, that's not like a standard practice that we've seen, but it is a very common practice where, both of my kids have had that chat in their classrooms at the elementary level. And usually 1 or 2 kids are buddied up in that room, right, because we don't allow a diabetic to walk to the clinic if they're feeling high or low, to get that care. So it is pretty common for not just diabetes, but other allergies as well, or other conditions that the parent is willing and wanting to share appropriately with that group. So it does occur quite a bit. I don't know if I could say it's standardized, but it is something we would, as a nursing team, they would ask and offer, and just anything. When we're looking at those health plans and care plans, we really just want to say, what is the best way to care for your child given these conditions or this, whatever it might be medically. And then, right, that's the point of a care plan, is to really try and individualize that for them.
Thank you. I can only imagine how many medical things that everyone has to manage on a daily basis. It's quite big, I'm sure. So thank you for putting these practices into place and continuing to look how we can continue to do better.
Thank you both. Appreciate it. Okay, moving on. 11.4, first reading, financial literacy, and Dr. Knapp is with us. Welcome.
Good evening, President Davidson, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, and Mrs. Marshall. Under Ohio law, students entering 9th grade on or before July 1st, 2022, they must earn 1/2 credit of financial literacy as a graduation requirement. And I did allude to this, and we had some conversation earlier this year. The law states that the study and instruction of financial literacy shall align with Ohio's financial literacy standards and model curriculum adopted by the State Board of Education in 2018 and 19, respectively. Now, this is what's super interesting. Right now, it says instruction of financial literacy. Like, that's it. It's loosely defined. No one's, following up. We determine what that looks like. And in fact, you don't necessarily have to pass the course right now. It just says instruction. So it's really interesting that the state has made a 180 on this particular requirement. We did have a course that somewhat aligned to this requirement. It was called Personal Money Management. It did not align enough. So we will not be offering that course moving forward, and that was in our business department. We do, interestingly enough, have a College Credit Plus course called Personal Finance that does align with this requirement, so students will have 2 options to choose from. We do recommend students take this their junior year, so really we could have waited a year to bring this before you, but we wanted to allow our students as much time as possible to take this course because of the limits, and we know some students have super tight schedules. We had a meeting with the counselors on Friday, and as we think about a student who's getting the IB diploma or one of our career center students, they have super tight schedules. So we felt we wanted to bring this before you as soon as it was ready to allow as much flexibility in our students when they schedule. Also, this will count as one of the 20 graduation requirements. A lot of times when people hear, oh, we have a new requirement, there was some misunderstanding and people were saying, oh, okay, so now we have 20.5 credits needed for graduation. I just wanted to get that on the record, that everyone was clear that that was not the case. It is still within the 20, and I think we used the word last time as a required elective, which is really contradictory. And with those tight schedules, we do want to have this offered in the summer. Probably not ready for this summer, but for next summer and beyond, it would be part of our courses. Our business and social studies teachers did meet throughout the fall to develop this course of study. They added vocabulary, instructional resources, put a pacing guide, and added activities. This was facilitated by Dr. Jill Williams, and I do want to have a special call out to Amanda Mosley, who has been really, really instrumental in this work. And she is also was on the board agenda earlier because she will be providing professional development to our staff. I am certified to teach financial literacy, and I would have a great learning curve. I mean, I can teach economics. I'm not prepared to teach this course, so I might attend her PD. And the current requirement of instruction in financial literacy is in our government course because that is a course that is required, but it will be phased out over the next few years, and we will have a new requirement, which is student interactions with peace officers. So we'll really take the instruction for financial literacy out and replace it with the peace officers requirement. And again, professional learning will be provided to our teachers. So are there questions over this one?
I am really glad that we are intending to have an online option. So my question, there are two parts to the question dealing with the online piece. One is, are we only going to do it in summer? And if we're doing it in summer, I'm assuming it's part of summer school, and thus it would have a fee attached?
So we are actually looking at our courses right now and determining what our price point is. Usually for new credit, we do have a fee associated with it of, I believe, $100. If someone was taking it for credit recovery, it would be free, but I do think that is something, I'm glad you brought that up, that is something that we would want to consider given this new requirement. We haven't gotten there yet, so thank you for thinking ahead. We'll get to that, for sure. And I think that was part of your question, but the other part would be, as we would develop that course, yes, it would be available to students. They would still need a teacher of record, and so it would be, my initial thinking is it would be similar to a CFA process, but I would have to think through that because we would want teacher support for that course.
Yeah, I think that is an option we're going to have to be looking at, not just for this, but for some other opportunities as well. Just because of the tight schedules of so many of our kids, we don't want to cut more of those non-required elective selections that our kids make, and also the programming choices that they're making in other arenas.
Yeah, thank you for also highlighting that there are going to be two different ways to fulfill this, right? With College Credit Plus being one of them. So consider this your opportunity to make a College Credit Plus commercial in the middle of the board meeting. If you could just talk about that for a second and what that means, because I know it might be an option that works well for lots of students, and College Credit Plus, students can start to look at College Credit Plus when they're in 7th, 8th grade, right?
Yes, and College Credit Plus is a great option for our students, and we continue to offer more courses, some that fulfill even high school graduation requirements. For example, our Intro to Politics meets our government requirements. So not only are you getting your credit for high school as one of your 20, but you're also getting college credit free of cost. And it can build, we have some students who work toward graduating or getting their associate's degree very soon after they graduate from high school. So it's moving on to start school with a wealth of college credits. We have some students will start as a sophomore. So I wasn't quite prepared for, this is a very long, expensive commercial. If I was, if this was the Super Bowl.
It is really not the
Yes,
Super Bowl.
yeah,
Very
but,
cheap airtime.
Yes, but seriously, it does allow students to earn free college credit. And my children are a junior and sophomore. So, the idea of the expense of college and knowing that you could get free college credits to apply, and every college is a little bit different with what they take. Sometimes you just wave into the higher course. Sometimes you do actually get the credit. So families would want to double check and not assume, because every institution, of course, is a little unique, as we like, but definitely an amazing opportunity that our students continue to take advantage of more and more.
Yeah, thank you for that. Good impromptu commercial. And I think, related to this particular course, while with College Credit Plus, it's up to the institution, right, how they bring that credit in.
Yes.
For this particular course, it will fulfill the graduation requirement.
Right.
No matter what happens when you go to college. So
Exactly.
I wanted to just put that on people's radar a little bit more to underscore that, because you might have a 7th, 8th, 9th grader, right, who you're thinking, gosh, they're going to be really jammed up in their schedule later on. Maybe they're thinking, Career Center or IB program. Well, they can already, there's a way they can already address this one.
Yes.
Check the box. So thank you.
Yes.
I think that's it. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
you're welcome.
Okay, recommended action and standing business, 12.1, resolution for impracticality of transportation. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Welcome, Mr. Snyder.
Thank you again, everyone. Before you this evening is a resolution to declare impracticality to transport identified students. Ohio law allows for public schools to determine impracticality of transportation after considering a number of factors, such as the cost of providing transportation and the number of students being transported. This past October 24th, the board passed a resolution declaring 20 students impractical for transportation, and before you this evening is a list containing 21 additional students that have been deemed impractical to transport. The Department of Purchasing and Logistics has evaluated each listed private school student per the requirements of Ohio Revised Code 3327.02 and declared the list of students impractical to transport. Again, for this evening's resolution, it is a total of 21 students. Therefore, approving this resolution would allow the district to offer payment in lieu of transportation in the manner provided per the Ohio Revised Code, in which the payment in lieu amount is determined by the Ohio Department of Education. Therefore, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the declaration of the listed students impractical for transportation and offering payment in lieu. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Hearing none.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. 12.2, overnight and out-of-state field trips. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Welcome back.
Hello, everyone. I am pinch hitting for Ann Baldwin as she is with her daughter at dance. And for those of you who know her, she's only texted me once to see how it's going. So I told her to buzz off and focus. And I did get a picture of Riley, so that was cute. Okay, so thank you, everyone. This evening, I have several out-of-state field trip requests for your consideration, including both Westerville North's baseball and softball programs traveling south during spring break to participate in games. And their reason, because the weather is warm, I don't disagree, as well as our middle school's 8th grade trips, and she did want to bring these forth all in one fell swoop to make that a little bit simpler. Each middle school will be traveling during a different week at the end of April and in May. And I'm happy to answer any questions, or more than likely just write them down. And we will get back to you.
Any questions? Hearing none. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. 12.3, resolution approving loose furnishings, bid packages 101, 102, 103, and 104. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And welcome back, Mr. Norn.
Thank you. The loose furnishings bid packages refer to the new furniture to be installed as it relates to the construction of Minerva Park Middle School, which is bid package 101, the Phase 5 renovation of Westerville South High School, bid package 102, the renovation of Hawthorne Elementary School, bid package 103, and the expansion and renovation of Whittier Elementary School, bid package 104. Bids were solicited in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code on October 31st. We received 3 bids that were publicly read on December 1st. As referenced in the bid tab, the lowest bid for the furniture package at Minerva Park Middle School was submitted by Zimmerman School Equipment in the amount of $1,026,334.65. The lowest bid for the furniture package at South High School was submitted by King Business Interiors in the amount of $89,971.95. And the lowest bid for the furniture packages at Hawthorne and Whittier Elementary Schools was a combination bid for both buildings, submitted by Educational Furniture in the amount of $658,162. The total cost for all 4 bid packages is $1,774,468. Approving this resolution allows us to maintain compliance to the project schedules. Thus, it is being recommended that the board accept the bids from Zimmerman, King Business Interiors, and Educational Furniture as presented.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none?
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. 12.4, resolution approving bid package 1 and bid package 2 at Westerville South High School. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Bid package 1 is for the HVAC improvements that include repairs to 1 boiler and converting it from steam to hot water, replacement of 1 large boiler with 3 smaller units that will improve our operating efficiency, replacement of 2 chillers with 1 new chiller, and the replacement of 6 rooftop units supporting the aux gym, auditorium, and the scene shop, and the replacement of 1 locker room air handling unit located on the west side of the building, just outside of the commons entrance. That unit will be moved to inside the building in a storage area. Bid package 2 is for the replacement of the curtain wall on the east side of South High School. This will offer the front of South a fresh new look and provide more natural light into the newly renovated classrooms. Bids were solicited in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code on November 7th. We received 3 bids that were publicly read on December 8th, as referenced in the bid tab. The lowest bid for both bid packages was a combination bid submitted by Place Services in the amount of $3,065,200. Place Services, commonly known around here as PSI, was the successful bidder for phases 3, 4, and 5 at South High School and continues to perform well for us. It is being recommended that the board accept Place Services bid as presented.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. 12.5, may I have a motion to appoint Von Bell as President Pro Tem from January 1st, 2023 until the election of the next board president, January 9th, 2023.
So moved?
Second.
Whoever wants it can have it.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. Congratulations, Vaughn.
So you agreed to that, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Moving on to public comments, we still do not have any, which takes us to board comments. Would anyone like to go first? Anyone have any comments?
I can go. That's fine. So I just wanted to give an update about some pieces of legislation. There's a lot that's happening. In Lame Duck, they try to push everything through, and they create what we call Christmas tree bills. But there are a few that are moving a little bit faster than others. So instead of spending 2 more hours here tonight, I will be a little bit briefer. Senate Bill 178, which we talked about last time, was introduced by Senator Bill Renanke, a Republican from Tiffin. It passed out of the Senate last week, and this bill, if you recall, would reform the functions and responsibilities of the State Board of Education, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, and ODE. Whew. Basically, it creates a Department of Education and Workforce with a cabinet-level director appointed by the governor and approved by the Senate. It divides the agency into two divisions, the Division of Primary and Secondary Education, which will also include preschool, and the Division of Career Technical Education. It authorizes the new department to be responsible for the rulemaking process and the enforcement of current rules, and maintains the current structure of the School Board of Education, but limiting its duties to teacher licensure, educator, or staff conduct in territory transfer decisions. So essentially, not very much. The bill was amended to institute the normal 90-day effective date for legislation, while specifying the new structure would be in place by July 1st. So it passed out of the Senate. It's headed over to the House. Tomorrow it will have its first hearing. And it's scheduled for a second hearing on Wednesday, where they will likely vote on it and could vote on the House floor by Thursday. So if at all you have some time to reach out to the House Primary and Secondary Education Committee, I would highly recommend doing so. We do have a legislator from our district on that committee, Representative Mary Lightbody, and the chair is Representative Gail Manning. And then House Bill 554, introduced by Representatives Mary Lightbody, a Democrat from Westerville, and Adam Byrd, a Republican from New Richmond, will have its fourth hearing in the Senate Primary and Secondary Education Committee on Tuesday, tomorrow. Opponent, proponent, and interested party testimony will be heard, and there's a possibility of an amendment. It would require the School Board of Education to issue 2-year temporary educator license to applicants with expired professional teachers certificates and professional educator licenses, as long as certain requirements are met. Also tomorrow, House Bill 497, which was introduced by Representatives Manning and Robinson, will have a second hearing in the Senate Primary and Secondary Education Committee. It is invited testimony only. As a reminder, this bill eliminates the third grade reading retention requirement. Other than that, just want to say thanks to Jeff LaRose and to the other retirees and for all their work over the years. I saw we also hired some new substitute bus folks. That was really exciting. And some food service people, and just really appreciate the intentionality that we're taking when we're thinking about our students' medical conditions. So thank you.
I can. Well, this evening, as we close out this meeting, this will be our last meeting of the year. And so around this time of year, the close of the year, is when a lot of people begin to reflect on what this past year has been like. And so I spent a little bit of time thinking about some of what has transpired, what has happened over the course of 2022. The year started off with still quite a bit of uncertainty in terms of what school and what education was going to look like in the midst of a global pandemic that is still with us. But since then, we've been able to get students and staff back in school, back into the building safely, to return back to a traditional mode of learning. And so, excuse me, I count that as a victory. I count that as a win over the course of this year. But I also would like to bring our attention to the fact that I believe public education throughout the course of 2022 is under an all-out assault from the Ohio General Assembly, from the governor's office, to the Ohio Senate as well as the Ohio House of Representatives. Over the course of 2022, the Ohio legislature has considered legislation to ban certain books from school libraries, has considered an Ohio version of the Don't Say Gay bill, has considered a ban on teachings of critical race theory, even though it's not a part of, that we are aware of, any board-approved K-12 curriculum. Right now, as Christie has mentioned, Senate Bill 178, that is before the legislature, will drastically change the way that the State Board of Education and the Ohio Department of Education operates. The State Board of Education has a resolution right now that it is considering to reject the guidelines that have been established to protect the rights of our LGBTQ students. And I just want to, go on record in opposition to both Senate Bill 178 as well as the resolution that is before the State Board of Education for their consideration. And those are just assaults that have been considered. There is legislation that has been passed that negatively impacts public education in a very real way. Legislation has been passed to alter the way levy language will appear on the ballot. Legislation has been passed that significantly changed the Board of Revision process, negatively impacting school boards and our ability to challenge property valuations. Legislation has been passed to allow school personnel with minimal training to be armed. The Fair School Funding Plan has been passed, but strangely enough, it's been passed but failed to be funded fully. I'm still not exactly sure how that works in the real world. I wish I could charge up a bunch of expenses but just not fully fund them. And it's amazing to me how legislatures pass a school funding plan that negatively impacts public education in this way. Since fiscal year 2011, overall state funding for education has increased by 8%. That's far below the rate of inflation for that period, from 2011 through the current budget. During that time, community schools funding has increased by 44%, and state spending on its voucher programs has increased over 500%. So who winds up losing in this equation? Our public school systems do. We are being forced to do more with less. All of this, even though study after study has proven, and I will use as, just for reference, to prove my point, a study conducted by the Stanford Graduate School of Education found that there is no evidence that vouchers significantly increase test scores. There is an all-out assault on public education, and in the state of Ohio, it shows no signs of letting up, with the incoming legislature being essentially a veto-proof legislature. So even if the governor was in opposition, whatever he did not approve of could be overridden by the legislature. I bring this up because I believe it's important that we have the help and assistance of our families and supporters of public education to become more and more aware of the drastic changes that are taking place. Public education as we know it today will not exist for very much longer if these kinds of attacks continue. It is what I would call death by 1,000 cuts. It's no one singular thing that's going to unravel the system, but it is the collective of the number of cuts that have occurred over the course of the last decade or more. And as a school board, as an individual school board member, as a treasurer and superintendent, we cannot do it alone. We need the support and the help of our families and supporters in our community to help make our voice amplified and to be heard. Public education, I believe, was established as part of a public good, and that education was a public education, funded public education was established because we believe it's good for all of our citizenry, all of our population. I believe it's a right for all of us to have an excellent public education, regardless of your zip code, regardless of the color of your skin, and regardless of what country you were born in. And that is under assault in the state of Ohio. Okay, that's bad stuff. But as we come to the end of the year, those are some of the thoughts that were bouncing around in my mind. I know now you're saying, boy, that's a scary place to be. But I also, as we come to the end of the year, want to at least take a moment to also celebrate some of our victories. We received the State Auditor's Award with distinction for 10 years in a row. We were able to arrive at agreements with our bargaining units, and we have seen that is not a given, that those kinds of agreements are able to be arrived at in an amicable fashion. We have continued work on our portrait of a graduate, and the crown jewel of this year was the opening of Minerva France Elementary School. So there is a lot of great work that has taken place, and so as 2022 comes to a close, I just want to thank all of our staff, the administration, my fellow board members, Dr. Kellogg, Ms. Marshall. Thank you for just the way that you have helped make Westerville City Schools great, and to help make Westerville City Schools truly a place where all of our students and all of our families belong. Merry Christmas to everyone. Happy holidays, however you choose to celebrate the holiday. Hope you have a great holiday. To all of the staff, please, during the break, make sure you take some time to relax, enjoy family, and look forward to hitting the ground running in 2023.
I don't know how you follow that. I agree with everything you said, Vaughn. And I want to celebrate, thank everyone in this always incredibly remarkable school district in the face of all that is happening around us and within us in many ways. We continue to move forward. We continue to strive. We continue to do all that we can do and to look for new ways to do what we can do to educate our young people. We have incredible people here. And I was thinking this weekend, I think you and I probably, there was like smoke coming out of our heads that went across the entire village here. But I was thinking about a couple of things. One is the long history we have of strength in this school district and standing for public education in this school district. We continue to do that. The board continues to do that. The superintendent does that. The treasurer does that. So many people in this school district do that. But it is a fight that, unlike in past years, it is a fight that I now worry we will lose. I never worried about that before. I'm worried. I'm scared for public education. Do you like Christmas Carol movies? You know the story, right? The Charles Dickens story about Ebenezer Scrooge. He's this misogynistic, self-driven, greedy, mean-spirited individual. And it was a character that represented what Dickens saw in so many ways as foundational reasons for societal ills in the country that he was residing in at that time. And it resonates with all of us continually through the decades, through the generations. I don't know about you. I watch classic Christmas Carol movies. I think my favorite's probably the Patrick Stewart version, but I admit I like the Muppets too. But I was watching actually George C. Scott this weekend, and I was thinking the ghost of Christmas past, the way I view it now in light of what's happening here, I view it in terms of what's happening to education in this state. The ghost of Christmas past, I now see it as the ghost of legislation for the greater good. The creation of public education in this state was about the common good, the development of society. It was about all of us, not just about people with kids in the schools, not just about this group or that group. It's about everyone. And the idea of common schools was to drive that entire message that there is one public system. And that is what will drive us into the future with success. So I think about some of our legislators, if they were having a Scrooge moment, if they went to visit the ghost of legislation for the greater good, what they might see. And what Scrooge went to see as regards the ghost of Christmas present, I view as the ghost of good governance. I think about what it's like when you look at what's going on, these bills that are being shoved through, the decimation of public education that happens with impunity, that's based on clickbait and sound bites, and is ruining what matters so much to all of us. Christmas, the ghost of Christmas future, I think kind of stays the same, because if you think about it, what's that about? In the Christmas Carol, it's about the ramifications of actions. What happens because of what's happening now? What's happening as regards what we're doing to what our past tells us needs to happen? In the Christmas Carol, you think about Marley. What does Marley tell us? What does he say to Scrooge when, he comes to Scrooge, and Scrooge initially tries to dismiss him, and he says that he wears the chain he forged in life, but he forged it link by link. What we have here in Ohio is a chain around all of us that's being forged link by link, law by law. The 1,000 cuts. Each one of those is a link in the chain that is dragging public education down. Not down as regards, oh, isn't this sad and won't we recover? Down into potential destruction. And we cannot let it happen. So like you, Vaughn, I say we need help. We need people to stand up and say, this will not be. What matters for all of us. What matters is not the lies that are told about things that go on and don't go on in schools or in the state board or wherever it may be. What matters is not what someone wants to say about what school choice does and doesn't mean. What matters is public education as a primary vehicle for the protection and furtherance of our society. And that's what's at risk as we close out this year in a lame duck session and we see what's happening with the Christmas tree bills. And we see what's happening as we move forward with the dismantling of one of our greatest institutions. So like Vaughn, it's kind of a scary place to live in my head too. there's so much good here, so much good. And we need to protect it and defend it and celebrate it and move it forward. And to do that, as we have not had to do so much, so hard in the past, we must stand together and face the enemies that would destroy it. That's a great place to end and say Merry Christmas, isn't it? But I do hope that everyone will take a few minutes over break and think about what's at stake and what's been accomplished and what we can do together to protect what is so good.
Well, I'll very briefly, excuse me, very briefly add my raspy voice to that. Maybe it's an evening for analogies, but I keep thinking about how important all of these little decisions are that we make all the time. And, think about, thank you to, the bus drivers. We've talked about transportation a lot. We've talked about how important it is to get our kids to and from school safely, how important it is to take care of their health while they're at school. All of these things really do matter. But I guess I feel a little like right before the pandemic came, right, where there was this talk in the news about a pandemic and we didn't know what it meant. And I was worried about, like, my kid gonna, get to this on time or that on time, or am I gonna get the groceries or this thing at work? And then suddenly it was gone. And all those things did matter in the moment, and they matter now, all these small things we do. But I'm reminded now that all of these little things we do every day are built on a foundation that actually can go away. And so I just ask everybody who cares about what happens to kids 6 or 7 or 8 hours a day and what that means for the rest of their lives to stand up and fight for public education. Thanks.
Wow, it's hard to go last. So I echo the comments and the concerns about public education, absolutely, positively. Then I'm going to switch over to a positive note. Shar Smith, I'd like to congratulate you on becoming president of 719. We're so excited to work together with you. So congratulations. We're delighted to have you. Secondly, congratulations to our retirees. To Jeff LaRose, I wish I could say this to you. The educational spaces you've created not only are inviting, but they're beautiful. And I think the kids are so inspired. I know I am, especially when I look up and think, just look at this space here, and hearing it from my own child, just the impact that South is making on him. So I am in deep gratitude to him for that, and the team and all the people that surround it. I know he doesn't do it alone, but I do think he has just a little bit different of imagination that gets us a little bit further. So congratulations to Jeff. I'd like to stay in touch because I may have a bus or two that he could work on in the future, just so you know. Lastly, we've talked a lot about tonight transporting our 14,000 kids and all the little components that go with it. And we've talked about fragile kids and medical needs. And when we haven't even and a little bit about, new curriculum that we're embarking on and mandates that are handed down to do that and how that's going to impact children. And I think about each one of these kids in our community and our families and our staff that this impacts. And I am so grateful. I feel like the staff here is our greatest asset, and I just want to say thank you to all of you and to have a great winter break, to please go off, don't answer your emails. I know that'll be hard for a lot of you, just saying, but really take this time to relax and enjoy your loved ones. And I just want to say, Nicole and John, would you like to say anything as we leave and end out the year?
Just want to wish everyone a relaxing holiday season. It has been a long year, I think, for pretty much everybody, and everyone's dealing with different things and just changes throughout the year. But As a parent in this district, I so appreciate our teachers, our nurses aides. My kid spends a lot of time at the clinic for various reasons. The bus drivers, everyone that she interacts with during the day, she's had nothing but positive experiences from our staff that work here and take care of her every day. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
So there's a saying that there's a reason why the rearview mirror is smaller than the windshield, right? So there's a lot in the rearview mirror for us that we've done as part of our accomplishments, challenges we've met. Ms. Altman referenced COVID and all the challenges that came with that. Lots of challenges we've met. And to encapsulate what I'm hearing this evening is what we know is we have just a talent pool in this district that helps us get through those things. So as I look through the windshield in front of me, I think about the opportunities in front of us that we're creating for our kids. And so, yes, we opened Minerva France, and we're going to open Minerva Park, and we're going to finish up some of these other facilities projects, and we're adding new curriculum. And we're looking at our Portrait of a Graduate and the way it changes the way we approach teaching and learning, and the work we're doing in equity to support all of our students and all of our families. And this board's focus on families and kids in just a pointed way, you look at everything through that lens, as we saw tonight, with your care and thinking about. It's been easy to take those policies on diabetes and students with health care and just rubber stamp them through, and you didn't. You went carefully through particular points that you wanted to understand better to help us guide the district and move us forward. And so thankful to have a Board of Education that does that. Thankful to have a treasurer who takes care of the finances the way we do and keeps us on the right path. Thankful to have a leadership team that keeps us all honest and is working so hard. And up and down the line, the talent we have, the commitment we have, and the community we have of resources. Westerville proper, the school district, all the people we serve, what I see in front of us is just great opportunity, and excited to embark on that, knowing we're using a compass, folks. We know the direction we're going, we just don't know what we're going to hit on the way, right? So it's easy when you have a road map, you know where all the turns are and when to turn. It's different when you have a compass, you know the direction you're going, but you know what you're going to hit. But if you're doing that with people you trust and have commitment to what you're doing, you know you'll get there. So thankful to have all that around me as we head into 2023.
Great, thank you all. Moving on to 15.1, the board will meet in an organizational regular session meeting on Monday, January 9th, 2023 at 6 p.m. here at the Early Learning Center. And with that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Ottman?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor-Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. And with that, we're adjourned.
07.